Okay? Not yet, but you should have a delay.
Sim, mais ou menos.
Vamos começar, João?
Estou a
Okay.
salvar.
So, good afternoon. It's a great pleasure to be here with you. Today is a very special day for many reasons, and we started our session in the morning because we have been talking about this project that has been going on for the last 3 years, involving around 60 researchers, and we are completing, we are approaching the end. We are going to finish this project sometime in June, and in the morning we were presenting the results of this project. Of course, that we are talking about research and development, and when we talk about research, we never say that we are going to complete anything. What we are doing is we are clearly launching the foundations of further research, and of course it will come out with tangible results. Otherwise, we academics will be called always as theoretical or too much theoretical. So this morning we have the chance of presenting a number of things, 60 people involved in the project, and a number of different heads. The project we're talking in the morning is about this. It's the SIDS Lab. This is the name we gave this project. We are talking about, a laboratory. We are talking about tourism destinations. We are looking at the tourism destinations clearly in terms of research and development, but we are also trying to make these destinations better. We have to be very clear and we have to face the reality. Tourism is extremely important. It represents a lot from an economic, social point of view. However, we have also been observing, pressure on some particular areas. And tourism, of course, that is not, paradise all the time. It may become a nightmare. But it may become a nightmare if we do not tackle the problems, if we do not manage, if we do not plan properly. If we leave tourism on its own, tourism may create problems in the city. And that is the reason why we started this process. The project we have, and we are going to conclude sometime in June, has been looking at a number of areas, namely economics and management. We are thinking about how to create new economic models, how tourism and the fuel that tourism is bringing in can percolate in the local economy. That is one dimension. The second one is about the environment, and we should consider that there is limits for everything, including for tourism. And therefore, we have to look at the limits of acceptable change. We have to think about the carrying capacity of the destinations. And then we have to think about the people, culture, and heritage we have there. So tourism has to manage, and in the tourism sector, we have to manage all these dimensions. The other one is about technology, and this university, the University of Aveiro, is traditionally, we were launched in 1974. We started in 1974, and with degrees in electronics and engineering. And therefore, we have a number of very strong research centers, and we also invited these people to be part of the project. So, the project we are dealing with is about how to manage tourism destinations. But we don't see the problem only in terms of its economics and management. So, we have decided to expand the project to many other areas. Again, looking at the environment, physical environment, heritage, sociology, culture, economics, technology, and so on. It involves 7 research centers based on this university. This afternoon, we are going to continue, and we have an excellent panel with us, with dear friends and colleagues. I don't have to introduce you, I'm just going to thank you all for coming. Professor Dimitrios Buhalis, Professor Atsuko Hashimoto, Dimitrios is from the University of Bournemouth, Atsuko is from the University of Brock. Marie-Louise Mangion is from Malta, from the University of Malta. David Telfer, Professor David Telfer, is from the University of Brock in Canada. And Sally North is from the Goodfellow publisher. So we will have this panel with, I forgot Adele.
Okay.
It's impossible. No, sorry. Adele, I can see you from here. And Professor Adele Ladkin. She's our dear colleague. I was trying to create some suspense.
Yeah, noted, Carlos.
And she's also from the University of Bournemouth. We have been friends for the last, I'm going to say only 15 years.
15 years.
15, okay. Just with this 50%. Okay, so what we are going to do is to talk about how to manage all these destinations in the future. But at the same time, we are going to talk about something which is also, bringing us together, which is a top name in the academia called Professor Chris Cooper. Professor Chris Cooper was also our mentor and our colleague, I would say, because this is the way he used us to treat him as a colleague, as an academic. And Chris Cooper clearly created a very strong school. He was a geographer. He was very shy, I would say. And that made him something which is one of the most important things. He was human. The way he was supervising us, he was not leading us, he was supporting us. And he was pushing us into our own directions and into our own objectives. So, it was basically managing us. And in the end, last year, we decided to pay him a tribute and decided to write this book. And the book you can see here on your right-hand side. And we were writing the book, we all decided to write a chapter, some of our colleagues are online with us, and we didn't know, we were not aware that he was ill, and Chris Cooper passed away in last July. So, but before that, he also contributed to this chapter to the book. So we have a collection of chapters, but it's not only about the chapters in this book. It's about the academia, even because Adele and Dave, they did not write anything in particular to this book, but they are excellent writers, academics, with lots of contributions in the end. So what we are going to do here is we are going to talk about how to manage, how to plan tourism destinations in the future. And we are going to pick up a number of situations. I'm going to start with the first one, talking about tourism networks, but in the meantime, our idea is also to show you how supervision and effective and efficient supervision can also, how we can pay tribute to good supervision and to a good supervisor called Professor Chris Cooper. So, let's start. As I said, I'm going to talk about tourism networks. Let me start by saying this, and we have a number of PhD students here. Whenever we start a PhD, a number of funny things do happen. And I'm going to tell you what happened to me and how Chris Cooper also managed my own situation. So, in 1993, we should not talk about dates, but anyway, in 1993, I started my PhD. And I submitted a proposal. And my idea was how to improve the operation of regional level tourism organizations. So I had a proposal, I was accepted in the University of Surrey, I landed there, and then I had this experience. I had Chris Cooper, he had already been my supervisor for the master, but I submitted the proposal, and Chris Cooper was looking at the proposal. My proposal was about how to make the world better from a regional point of view, I would say, okay? Regional planning, tourism planning. And, my idea, initial idea, is that we could improve the operation of tourism by improving the operation, the functioning of the tourism organization. And that would be great because Portugal was in its early stages, I would say, in terms of planning and development. So I was with Chris Cooper, sitting in front of him, and he was asking me a question that really bothers those PhD students. What's new in your PhD? And I was telling him, well, it's new because I'm going to be the first person with a PhD in Portugal in this area. That was very, very human, very British. We're not going to say, come on, what you are saying is nothing. So, but what is your contribution, your theoretical contribution? And I was telling him, okay, what I really want is to improve the operation of, the regional tourism boards in Portugal. And he was saying, that is not a contribution. So I did not understand. And I did not understand that by that time, we were in the 90s, because Portugal was, I would say, evolved in a way where the most important influence was the French school. And French school is extremely important. But it's not like the Anglo-Saxon school where you have to ask questions and you have to tackle the problems directly. Okay, this is the way nowadays we do all our PhDs. So I was, involved in that and I did not understand. So one day I went to the bookshop and I found a book called, a very simple one, Adele also has a copy, you mentioned that to me.
Yes, yeah.
Called How to Get a PhD.
Read
And
it.
from that book, I started learning, the roots of research. And the roots of research are about, science, about philosophy. And then practical things like how to manage your supervisor, which is also critical of PhD. So it had a number of things. So I start, from a different stage, looking at, how to improve the operation of tourism in Portugal. And, sometime later on, almost 1 year later, I was reading, and moving from one place to another. And I ended up with this concept, which was new. And I'm very proud that I was the person that brought this area into the tourism area. Tourism networks. And then Chris Cooper also had other people, like Rodolfo Baggio, Noel Scott, and they also did extremely important research in the area. But the idea is, very often, the problem is not about what you see, it's about how it works. And the problem of tourism destinations is about the way we deal with people, we deal with economics, we deal with the management of the whole thing. So I start moving on, and I start realizing that something that was taken from other fields, namely from psychology, okay, because psychology was using this. Why? Because human beings are not a matter of, tangible things. It's about mental things. It's about how we connect and how emotionally we connect with the other people. So basically, I end up with this concept of regional networks. And in Spain, there was another guy working at that area called Jarillo, and was also doing that for businesses. And for the first time, I started thinking, tourism is really, it's really diverse. It involves a number of people. So it's not about a matter of how people, individually, organizations perform. It's much more how they operate as a whole. And what it really came to my mind is that, and you have a couple of slides here, I'm not going to read what is there, otherwise I would be bored, like, in a classroom, but I don't want to bother you. It's like, regional networks are becoming a powerful tool for collaborative planning and development. Why? Because the world has changed. Okay, the world has changed. And nowadays, what we have is a world where people must have a say. Okay? And people want to collaborate. And people are better educated. And therefore, we have to perform in terms of optimizing the whole potential we have from this area. So then, I came up with this first definition of a tourism network. That is from 1996, when I concluded the PhD. Networks are organizational structures. And by that time, I was dealing mostly with two concepts, bureaucracies and hierarchies and markets. And networks were, standing in the middle. And we are also talking about, political movements like the Third Way in the UK and at other places where people were thinking about, an alternative between the welfare state and the market-led economy. So we're talking about the Third Way. Not from a political point of view, but here in terms of another alternative or another alternative to this extreme pole. So we came out with this and say that networks are based on two or more administratively independent organizations which decide by a formal or informal commitment to engage in a medium or long-term cooperation process involving the exchange of products and services. A network is therefore underpinned by the premises that every organization depends on the success of each other, and also that competition must be viewed beyond the region where an organization is located. So, that is a new world, and that is something which is new, and by that time was completely new, because we were not dealing with the regional planning organizations in that way. We were dealing in a completely different way. From this point of view, we have all these benefits and challenges of networks for the development of tourism destinations and businesses, people. But of course that this is not completely stable. Why? Because networks involve trust, and people usually don't trust each other. So it's a matter of trust, and it's not only about ethics, it's also about business. So you have to materialize these relationships and these networks on tangible things, but at the same time, they require, of course, some sort of trust. So, from here, I start building the first networks in the area. And this is, you can see from there, but this is the cover of my PhD thesis back from the 90s. The way, and this is the style from the University of Surrey. Again, I start this area, but I also have to say that Rodolfo Baggio and Noel Scott afterwards, they did a great job in this area, and all these contributions are extremely important. So, networks, and these are the networks I had in the beginning. 3 networks. I did my empirical study in Portugal, in Mangion, Aveiro, and in Algarve. And these are the networks. I was looking at who's who in the regional tourism organization. And basically what we are trying to do there is to understand how different organizations connect with each other. And what I really concluded, and it is really surprising, is that we are always saying that, tourism is made of private sector, organization, and it's a matter of fact. Even in Portugal, tourism operates under the umbrella of the Ministry of Economics. But all these private organizations are peripheral in the decision-making process. They are critical in terms of the business, but they are peripheral in terms of the decision-making process. And these are the initial networks. Aveiro has become a place with lots of research in this area. And this inspiration, I remember initially Chris Cooper was delighted and said, you have found and you have brought me into an area that I did not think about it. I'm really proud of that. And then you also so enthusiastic about this, but now what you should say is also about the legacy. We are researchers, and we should also think about how have we developed these ideas. And this is a second tier from my younger PhD students, Filipa, Zélia, and so on. And they also did excellent research, and these are, I would say, the second layer of networks we have in Portugal. We are conducting even MSc students. We have a number of theses, PhD theses. We also have a girl from mathematics, she was with us, working in this area. So we have a number of PhD and MSc theses in this particular area. So this is the second layer. We decided to move on, and I'm sure that Chris will be very happy with this. And now we have the third layer of the networks. The third layer is about the project we were presenting this morning. What we really have to assume is that tourism is not only about, and the networks are not only about how we connect people and organizations. It's much more than that. Tourism and networks are about how we connect, knowledge. And as Francis Bacon said once, knowledge itself is power. So what we have to do is how to network different areas. And that is the reason why in the STIDS Lab, the project we were presenting this morning, we are bringing together all these different disciplines, all these different research centers. This is what we are doing, and I would say that is clearly the third level we have and third layer we have in this particular area. We are combining economics and management, and we have that research center, GovCop, and then we have technology, 3 research centers from the University of Aveiro, IETA, IT, and Engenharia. Then we have design, and from design we have ID+, then we have another from culture, and we have one from the environment, looking at carrying capacity and limits of acceptable change. So basically what we are doing for this third layer is to look at tourism economics and management and how the engine operates with the private sector, businesses, the natural and the built environment, and then what is the role of technology, the role that technology plays in the area. So that is the third layer, and for the third layer, and I'm going to stop with this example, is a platform that we have decided to launch in Portugal. It's not only a matter of regional level organizations. What we have realized is that tourism is powerful. It accounts directly for 13% to the GDP in Portugal, but it's approaching fast 20%. And so all these connections require that the academy and the industry have some sorts of forum where we sit and where we take the tourism matters, issues, longer than what we have nowadays. And we have decided to create this Plataforma Nacional de Turismo. This platform is a platform that includes, right in the beginning, now the number is increasing, 125 founding members. We have all universities with tourism degrees in Portugal, so they are members of the networks. We also have all professor catedráticos, full professors in the area, they also are members, and the vast majority of tourism researchers. From the industry, we have the main national tourism organizations, a large number of regional and local associations, and we have non-profit organizations. What are our objectives? Are these that you can see from here. We are trying to pave the way of new forms of non-administrative governance. We are trying to bring together, the industry and science. This is what we are trying to do. And we are trying to create more inclusive, democratic, and informed solutions, and to assume that decision-making needs to be supported by wise decision, or decision-taking has to be supported by the decision-making process. So, basically, this is what I would like to tell you about planning and management when we look at it in terms of the networks. Clearly, I start my initial steps with Chris Cooper, and what I've been trying to do is to take these ideas further in order to, I would say, to strengthen the knowledge in that. So thank you very much. The next one is going to be.
I said this we asked Lisa because she's in Australia in midnight. Lisa would like to make a small intervention. Lisa, you okay?
Thanks, Dimitrios.
Just give us a second. Give us a second until we set up the thing.
What do you want me to do now?
Just wait, please. Can you give these on the screen?
Yes.
Technology.
Because it's midnight in Brisbane. You look very good for midnight.
Sitting in the dark.
Yeah.
Okay, just let me put Lisa at contact.
Okay.
You're on, Lisa?
Well done, Philip.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for the opportunity, Dimitrios and Carlos, to say a couple of words. I'm not going to talk long. It's a little late over here. So thank you for the chance to say something now. Look, I hadn't actually planned on saying anything. I was just really keen to join remotely, just to be part of the group. I think it was such a lovely initiative that Dimitrios and Carlos and working with Sally that's established, and I remember talking to Chris about it when the idea first came, and as we all know, Chris, he was humbled and embarrassed, and you don't have don't do that, but of course he secretly loved it. We all loved Chris, and he's had such a big impact. He was such an important person. I was lucky to work with him in the year before he actually passed away on his Essentials of Tourism text, and it was great to be able to work with him again. And one of the things that I really reflected on, especially doing all the edits and copy edits and things after he passed, was he had such a distinctive way of writing. And I feel like we could all pick something up and we would know that Chris wrote that. He just had the most unique style of writing, and it was such a pleasure. So I hope you have an amazing event. I wish I could be over there in person, but thanks for the opportunity to say a few words.
Thank you very much, Lisa. And you were the last co-editors with your new book, so it's amazing. Okay. I think we need to go to India now because Vanessa is getting late there. I think this is going to bring a lot of energy from India.
Yes, but I am in India, but I'm a Mauritian. I'm from the island of Mauritius. I always come to my flat. And of course, my book.
This is what you're buying, right?
Yes. So I'm very honored today to have this opportunity to talk a bit about Chris Cooper. So I really wanted to be there, but I could not, as I told Dimitrios that here they are putting pressure on me. They are saying you have to be here for the graduation, so I cannot come. So talking about Chris, I am from the island of Mauritius, and Mauritius is a tourism destination. But when we talk about tourism program was introduced in Mauritius. At that time, I'm talking about 2000 and 2001. We had only two universities. We had University of Mauritius and University of Technology Mauritius. And we had our first tourism program in 2001, when we had our first tourism program, the first textbook that came to our university was that old book, Cooper, Fletcher, One Bill. I don't know if you remember that. There was a list of names. So this book was everywhere. And Cooper, Fletcher, and One Bill. People know the names. So when I completed my first degree, I was the first student who completed the first, the first PhD, not PhD, undergraduate program in tourism and hospitality management. I was the first student who completed, and I got a gold medal. I was a gold medalist. And let me tell you, I was going to the library. We had limited books because Mauritius is a small island. We don't have enough resources. I used to hide the books. I used to hide the book of Chris Cooper, Fletcher, and Buhalis so that I can have it again. So this is where I started to know a bit about Chris Cooper achievements and all the other authors. After 2 years, because I was the gold medalist, they gave me a scholarship. I got a scholarship from the government of Mauritius to pursue an MPhil and a PhD. And they told me that they gave me the responsibility. They told me, you have to look for your supervisor. So what I did, I went online. At that time, we didn't have internet. Internet was not as it is today. It was very restricted. You have to go in a dedicated place. You start typing and sending emails or whatever we did. So I tried to send an email to Chris. I said, let me look at this list of celebrities on that Cooper, Fletcher, One Hill. I started with One Hill. One Hill never replied, but Chris replied. I was so happy. On that day, what I did a copy of that. I shared it. See, Chris has replied to my email. You see, he has accepted to be my supervisor. This is the first moment. It was in 2005 exactly, and I was pregnant at that time. I was so happy. And I started sending emails to Chris. And my topic for my PhD was on internal marketing. And I think Chris has visited Mauritius once, but at that time I was still at school. It was, I don't know, many years ago. He told me that, and I said to him that one day you should again come to Mauritius. But unfortunately, he never came afterwards. So what happened, I was very happy, and he started supervising. How the supervision was taking place, I was from the island of Mauritius and he was from UK. Definitely traveling to UK is very challenging for us. We cannot travel so often, very expensive. No one is going to pay for my ticket. So we were arranging to have emails, supervision through emails. We did not have WhatsApp and all those things at that time. It was not too, something too current that people were doing. So we used to send emails. Chris was so prompt that I was scared to send emails to him. If you send him an email just now, you talk about the progress of your work that happened this. Within 30 minutes or 1 hour, he gives you a list of the comments. Now you have to start implementing the comments. So what I was doing, I said, oh my God, he's too quick and rapid. So I was giving myself time I'm going to reply after 1 week. Because if you reply now to Chris, he will respond within the 1 hour. And he responds with all the details and everything. You will be scared. You will know, oh my God, so many things, so many comments. But he was really very receptive. And he used to, I saw him as a mentor, I saw him as a guide, I didn't know what to say. But he was a very special person for me. And I'm always very proud, even today, even yesterday, even anytime I will reply, because I feel that I'm a student of Chris Cooper. And it's a matter of pride. And at the level of my university, we were really very proud to have Chris. We invited him once, but unfortunately, he could not come. What I did, I went to Nottingham. At that time, he was in Nottingham, talking about 2009. He was in Nottingham, I went, I met him, and he was really very caring and receptive. He knew that I came from very far. He accommodated me in his office, and he gave me access to lots of resources, because in Mauritius we did not have lots of resources at that time. And he printed lots of research articles. He told me how to write. He guided me. He had a very unique way of guiding, and I always remember that. And I think today, when I guide PhD students, I have a tendency to do the same thing as he did. I replicate what he does. So if I get a kind of, something from my student, I also have the tendency to reply very quickly, because this is how I felt. And this is how I'm talking about it today. And I also want that tomorrow, if I've got a PhD student, he or she should also talk like this about me. So this is something which I always remember. And also, he traveled, he went to Oslo afterwards, when I was at the final phase of my PhD. And again, I got a chance. I went to see him there. And at that time when I went, I met Lisa also. This is when we met Lisa. I remember we met together during that, there was a drink kind of, I don't know how we call that. There was a small party. And I met Lisa for the first time, and it was really, again, very enriching. He has explained to me how to, how to ride and everything. And finally, for my Viva, I have completed the Viva, and on that day it was my last supervision with him, and I got the chance to see his lovely dog. He came and he online and he saw me and he gave me his number and he said to me, if you have any problem, you please call me. And on that day it was a long Viva, and I went, and afterwards I graduated and I became, today I'm very proud to say that I am a product of CRISPR. So this is a bit about my journey with Chris Cooper.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you
for
very much,
your
Vanessa.
testimony.
Thank you. Guys, we know we've kept you for a while, it's quite late there, so you're more than welcome to stay with us, but we're gonna go into the local guys from now on, okay? Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Au revoir. So who's going next? So do we go? No.
Who is next?
Do you want me to go next?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
I'll go next.
Just give me, Dimitrios, can you give me just 1 second?
Okay, why not?
Because your presentation came
Yeah.
back. I need to.
So I'll go back on the Chris Cooper theme because I was
Give me 1 second.
Chris' first PhD student, and so going to Surrey, do your masters. They gave me some supervisors that they had no expertise in tourism. So I went back to Chris and I said, Chris, please save me. So Chris did some magic thing and said, come along. And then the journey started because we started talking about destinations, and the book and the conference and the project is all about tourism destination management. And Chris understood destinations very well. I didn't understand destinations very well. I was a hospitality person, tourism person, travel agent, tour operating, distribution. So I was on the micro level, but he got the macro level. So we started going into, so I went to him and I said, look, there are, with all due respect and all the rest of it, you have no idea how it works on the ground. And Chris being Chris, he said, tell me about it. I said, there are two things that you guys don't understand. And it's not you, but nobody understands, because I spent a lot of time looking into the literature. Nobody was talking about distribution. Even now, the only book on distribution is mine, and it's written 25 years ago. There's no books on distribution of tourism. People are talking about marketing, but actually, please. But actually, nobody really knows distribution. So I said to Chris, nobody knows distribution, and distribution is the most critical thing, because actually distribution is the money. Distribution makes or breaks. It's really about the money. And he is observing from up there. The second thing I said, and this is what we're talking about in 91, I said, nobody really understands how critical technology will be. And I could see the technology coming without being a technology person. And I could see that technology is going to change everything. It's a little bit like now with AI. Everybody sees the AI tsunami coming, but nobody actually knows what's going to happen. So Chris said, tell me what you know. I said, I know nothing, but I know what I don't know. You guys don't know what you don't know. And he said, what should happen? I said, you give me a scholarship, and then we'll find out together. And the rest is history. This is how it actually happened. Chris has been incredibly influential in my life, in my career. He was a mentor up to the very last minute. I've got some pictures of him. But actually, he was so shy that we don't have pictures of him.
Yeah.
Of course, at that time, we didn't have mobile phones, you know, doing selfies every 30 seconds and things like that, right? But even with all the cameras and all the film, and I was a photographer at the time, and you know, I would take pictures. Chris was very photo shy. The other thing, I need to say a few funny things as well. The thing that you always remember is that Chris was with a short sleeve shirt, no matter the weather. It was snowing outside. He was always on a short sleeve shirt, and that was interesting. He was a very good friend of Aveiro University, and he helped a lot in developing the department, the school, and the research center into. And I should have started by saying thank you to Carlos and the project and everybody else who are hosting us today. But he was part of us. This is when we launched our first books. You have Mike Riley there, Joan Mangion, and the first books that we did, what, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, bloody hell.
No,
2000.
what, 30 years?
Time flies.
2006. 2006.
This
20 years.
20 years ago.
Not 30.
This is in my inaugural lecture. Of course, it's the picture is cropped because the John Fletcher and Steve Warnhill up there. And this is the last time I was with Chris in Bournemouth, and it was very windy. And this is the last goodbye to Chris. And actually, it's a very sober moment where you kind of realize that there's an end to life, and one moment you've got someone that you really treasure, and the next moment you don't. So go to the people that you love and tell them that you love them, okay? Good day. Now, there's a secret place somewhere about 5 or 6 kilometers from here, where every time I come to Aveiro, Carlos and I disappear. And every time we end up doing strange things.
Don't tell me. Don't tell me.
Stop there.
But one of the things,
Yeah.
one of the things that this place can get you pregnant. Let's put it that way. And gets us pregnant with books. We are producing books every time we get there. And every time we start with one book and we end up with 2. So it has happened several times. So last time we were there in 2023.
Around that. 3 years ago.
Yeah? 23. We were there, and I was kind of aware. I said, did we pay enough tribute to Chris? Does he know how much we appreciate what he has done for us? And that was a conversation that we started. And Carlos said, what should we do? I said, should we do a conference? And he said, yeah, but the conference is coming and going. Let's do something that stays. And I said, okay, what stays? A book stays. And what the book should be about? And we just went through the various colleagues and said, what was Chris really about? He was really about tourism destinations. And then we start putting words down, management, planning, marketing, and impact. And he was dealing with all of these things. So that's how the idea came up. So we communicated to everybody secretly. We said, don't tell anything to Chris, because he would say, no. We called Sally from that special place, and I said, Sally, I don't want to do another book, but I'd like to do a special book for Chris. And Sally said, yeah, go ahead. And I said, don't ask me for a proposal, give us a contract now from that specific. Yeah. So we started the book in 2023. We called everybody. Chris had about 20 PhD students and graduates, and everybody was enthusiastic. Some people could do, some people could not. We started putting everything together. 2024, a year and a half later, we produced a book, the first draft of this book, that we sent to Sally and Sally doesn't like it. Oh. Because it was very sentimental, it was very, it's very much about Chris, and it was really about a lot of personal stories, and wouldn't be a commercial kind of success. So Sally, because she's very clever, she went to Chris, and he said, Chris, what do you think about this? And Chris, being very shy, he said, it's all about me, can you please turn it down and make it about science? And that is what actually delayed the book for a year, because then we moved a little bit. And on the one side, we're very, very grateful that actually Chris could see the draft, because it was more or less more what we want to tell him. But we're very sad that Chris is not sitting there. So that's about Chris and the book and how the book came out. You'll see when you buy the book outside. Let me repeat this. When you buy the book outside, you see the different sections and those people who have written it. And actually what has happened is that, and it's evident now, is that we kind of see Chris as our intellectual father. And now he has got grandkids, and now he's getting grandkids as well, because of all of our graduates and the graduates of our graduates. But I think this is the most emotional thing in the book, which I'm not going to read out. I'll get you to read this out. This is the conclusion of his chapter of 40 years of writing. So he's sitting on the box set up there, looking at us, watching with antics on the academic stage, at times applauding, often cheering, and occasionally with my head in my hands. And that is Chris, really. Okay, so after that, I don't really fancy to do a presentation. I'll go very quickly and show you some of the stuff that is in the chapter, so you can buy the book. Okay, you can take a picture of that, that's nice. But before we do that, a little bit of commercials. This is Bournemouth University, come and visit us. This is the conference that we're running in Malta. Yay! Where Philippa and Mario are co-chairing, and then Carlos is speaking, hopefully this year again, and several of you.
Like 4 times in Malta. Definitely.
You can vote afterwards if you like all Carlos and Mario.
The obvious.
Ask the audience, right? Also, we're going to do a big TTRA conference in Bournemouth just after Easter next year. Just after Easter next year. So Sally will be sponsoring. She doesn't know that yet.
I'll be kindly invited.
You're kindly invited, meaning. Yeah, exactly. Thank you very much, Sally. Your assistance is appreciated. Why do we do tourism? I think this is quite often. Some of the papers I read in Tourism Review, people forget, why do we do tourism? Do we need to do tourism? I mean, a lot of people are complaining about tourism. We don't need to do tourism, right? If you don't want to get to do tourism, you can get out. If you cannot take the fire, get out of the kitchen. I'm quite. This is a very nice. Anybody can read Greek?
Everyone reads Greek.
Excellent. So this is. I found this chair that says "Μαϊσί σε ταξίδι χωρίς προορισμό," meaning, but you are a trip without a destination. And I think this is really about tourism. It's really about moving into the space and enjoying some incredible landscapes and some resources and managing these resources. And now we're talking about sustainability, we're talking about regenerative, we're talking about giving back to the community, we're talking about a whole range of things. But what makes us go to these places, I'm taking bookings at the end, as you realize, right? And what makes us support these places. So this is the Sustainable Development Goals. We've done a lot of research on this, on where tourism is actually contributing to Sustainable Development Goals. And that gives me the background to talk about the chapter that you read on the book that you're going to buy from outside. Are we selling outside, sorry?
But there, there's flyers with links as well.
Okay,
so
flyers.
Either.
If someone would like to buy today, what do they do?
They can do, yeah.
Great. So when you buy the book, you'll see several very distinct things. Now, because I'm an ancient guy, this was the first machine I was trained on. I had training on how to operate a telex machine with a tape. This communication in 86, this was in a hotel I was working. In the early 90s, I bought a very nice fax. It's quite shocking now for a lot of the people. In Germany, they still give you a business card with a fax number. It's a fascinating.
Formation group.
So when I arrived in England, and when I started doing the masters and the PhD in particular, what was happening was the GDSs were coming up, Global Distribution Systems. You may have heard Amadeus and Galileo. This was the revolution, and my idea when I started the PhD was we would piggyback on the airline systems that existed already to communicate with the travel agents so we can sell destinations. So if Algarve, Aveiro want to sell itself, it will go through the GDSs. And just before I left Greece and during my PhD, I developed what's called the Regional Integrated Computer Information Reservation Management System. I can say that again, Regional Integrated Computer Information Reservation Management System, something that we call now the Destination Management Systems. This I designed in '89 and it's published in Tourism Management in '93. Long way forward, this coming out of the Encyclopedia of Tourism Management and Marketing, where technology is the enabler of the entire tourism system that operates in order for the system to be profitable and to create equitable returns for resources utilized. Now, this bit that says equitable returns for resources utilized and the tourism system with the resources and the value created afterwards is something that we co-created with Chris for the first tourism practice principles and practice book when they first started. So the last chapter, if you read the first edition of this in 92 or 93, I wrote that with Chris, and that was what I came up with, and he actually improved it to make it equitable return for resources utilized, meaning that we'll understand what resources you use and look for returns and sustainability of the resources that you use in order to do tourism. If you didn't have that, you shouldn't do tourism. The pyramid came out of the encyclopedia, which is the other book that you really need to buy and read. But this is the whole thing and how the whole thing is working. So for those of you who know what I do smart tourism and AI and technology and all the rest of it. And I'm trying to understand what makes a destination smart. And what makes a destination smart is not only to use the various technologies that you see here, but it's really about enabling people in real time to navigate resources, destinations and places using a whole range of technological solutions and engaging in different experiences that are individualized, personalized and contextualized. It's all about supporting individuals to go through a complex kind of operational environment, a hostile environment, which is called the destination, and actually personalize it to themselves. The way they do that is really having the technology around them. So you've got customer centricity, the customer is right in the middle, you've got all kinds of technologies around them. And then what happens is that they interact with the different facilities using technological solutions. In fact, you are all doing it by having your mobile phone. Everybody is using Google Maps, everybody is using Google Flights, everybody is using a whole range of facilities, and you're constantly moving around using all these technologies. In actual fact, it's really difficult to get lost these days, because you know the system knows constantly where you are. And you get updates and you get all kinds of things. So, welcome to Porto, would you like a taxi? And you know, all of these things. Because what happens is that your systems that you don't know that you've got them, they're in your machines. They know where you are, and actually they know you, and they're trying to bring everything together. So what occupies my life is ambient intelligence, smartness, artificial intelligence, robots, autonomous devices, drones, and metaverse. And smartness is all through the Internet of Things, the Internet of Everything, sensors and beacons, big data and data analytics, to actually co-create experiences in real time. Now, the real time is really the complicated thing, because if it rains in Aveiro, it's a very different experience than if it's sunshine in Aveiro. If you arrive at 9 o'clock in Porto, it's a very different experience if you arrive at 11 o'clock. If you've got a British passport, it's a very different experience than if you've got a Greek passport. I'm out in 6 minutes, Adele is out in 45 minutes. So all of these things are about contextualization, it's about making smart solutions, and it's actually how can you co-create value in the system. You've got the bit on the bottom there, that's the physical layer. It's the resources that you've got and what can you do with them. Then you've got the data layer with the big data that we are collecting. Then you've got the technical layer that enables us to do data mining in real time and understand what's going on. Then you've got the business layer, which helps you understand what you're going to do with the data that you just collected. And then you've got the experience layer. I'm just talking to a guy over the Easter holiday. I was in Cornwall and I was staying in a very nice cottage. And I really liked the cottage, so I started talking to the guy who owns it. And I said to him, look, if I work with you, you'll double your money, you'll double your profitability. And he didn't believe me, so I had a conversation with him. Time?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not going to say the story. Catch me later. The next thing is artificial intelligence. Everybody wants to know AI. It's quite funny. And everybody says, yes, we're doing it, but actually this will show. Okay, feels like 97 for me again. It's again a similar situation. 97 people were saying, oh yes, it's happening. People were saying, no, it's going to go away. Everything's going to change, and it's going to change very fast. From the tourist point of view, AI now replaces search engines, it replaces distribution, it replaces everything. Because you are going to give AI a problem and it's going to come back with a solution. For the time being, if you want to find information, you need to structure the information the way that the machine has got, and then what needs to happen is that you need to find the information with whoever it has got. So if anybody can tell me where Gatto Preto has gone, that is my need. Google cannot help me. I need to find some artificial intelligence to tell me this is where Gatto Preto has gone, because it has gone from Aveiro. From the industry point of view, we'll analyze big data at no time. We'll have endless ability to actually analyze the data and do proactive strategies based on this. Now, There's a big issue about the small guys and the big guys and what's going to happen, who owns the big data. I can have you here for 3 hours, but Carlos wouldn't allow me. It's his fault, it's not mine. We've done a lot of research on this. We're doing more. Anybody who would like to do AI in tourism, talk to me. But basically, we say that it's going to change, transform the guest experience, and it's going to transform intermediation destination. You remember I said distribution, nobody knew distribution. And now what's going to happen is that tourism destination management, the theme of the conference, is going to change dramatically because the network is going to change, the ecosystem is going to change, and we'll manage the ecosystem in a very different way. Be very careful on what you see because AI is fantastic at creating hallucinations, and actually a lot of things, especially during election times, videos will come up with a lot of different things and will be really, really difficult. And many industries are going to be affected with this. So I asked AI, what does Buhalis do? Ta-da! And then I said to AI, what Buhalis really wants to do? Ta-da! Quite funny this. But a lot of things are going to be created. Cultural heritage, anybody who's doing cultural heritage, what you see quite often is the ruins of something, and then you're trying to be based on guides who explain to you, and you're trying to imagine what AI is going to do. It's going to give you the whole thing, it's going to show you what happens if you go into metaverse. You will feel it, experience it, smell it. Your guys up in the University of Montagna.
Bathing interior.
Yes, a Grand Montagna, which is Porto 1 hour in.
No, 1 hour from Porto.
Trás-os-Montes?
Yes.
Trás-os-Montes. UTAD. Universidade Trás-os-Montes.
Trás-os-Montes. They've got a fantastic AI virtual reality lab where they're spraying you with different smells and you feel that you're on the sea and things like that. It's absolutely incredible what they're doing. So, we're going to synthetic environments and synthetic experiences that they're going to be on a digital twin. It's going to be in parallel to the real thing, and you're going to see all of these things. And artificial intelligence, you have seen nothing yet. It is just starting. The ecosystem is going to be very different. The internet transforms everything in terms of the access to information. Artificial intelligence will transform everything. We are starting again. As far as I'm concerned, we're starting with white canvas and we're redesigning the ecosystem of tourism. The artificial intelligence transforms everything, the nature of intelligence, decision making and competitiveness. You have to pay more to hear more about that, but I'll leave you with these pictures. For the time being, negotiation quite often is human to human. How much your room, this how much my room, the other. Increasingly will be machine to human, because as a hotelier you talk to booking.com, the AI of booking.com, you will have a negotiation, The next thing that really worries me is when it's going to be machine to machine. Because what happens here is that when I negotiate with Carlos, sometimes we agree, sometimes we disagree, but because we are good friends and we like each other, there are some principles, okay? We are not going to kill each other. When you start operating here, the machine is programmed to kill the opponent. And when we go here, it will be the machine kill the other machine. I'll keep him busy for a while. Okay, come to Malta, come to Bournemouth. Obrigadíssimo. And our next speaker is Atsuko Hashimoto.
Professor.
Professor Atsuko Hashimoto.
After Dimitrios' presentation, I'm very intimidated, but
No.
yeah, Dimitrios, Carlos, and me are Chris Cooper's first student group. So that's why we know each other for so long, and they are very nice to me. I'm just going to turn on this, so I'll keep myself in time. Okay.
Bye bye, Lisa. Lisa just left. And
Yeah, I just
Rodolfo Baggio is also here, just saying hello and
Just
goodbye.
closing.
Não estava nessa ainda.
Ah, Vanessa estava.
Oh, Rudy Baggio.
Yes.
Okay, keep Rodolfo for after Atsuko.
He's here, okay?
He's leaving
We have
actually.
people.
She can go ahead.
No,
you go.
Okay. All right. So I started my PhD research on the perception on natural resources in tourism industry. Thank you. And at the time, when I submitted my proposal, Chris had this kind of distinct look. He doesn't say it outright, but he has this look that makes me feel, am I doing something wrong, or am I missing something important kind of look? And then I had that look 4 times, and I had to rewrite my proposal 4 times until he said, this looks good. So if you are a PhD student and if your supervisor asked you, this proposal needs revision, don't be discouraged. That's for your own sake in long run. But anyway, so I have to redo 4 times because at the very beginning, my proposal was sustainability, perception of the natural resources, but everything was about environment, natural environment. And he didn't want me to do natural environment alone. So that's where my research of cross-cultural comparison came in. So I was going to ask the same question about how the tourism industry perceive natural resources in tourism industry, but he wanted me to do the cross-cultural. So now I use my background of being Japanese. I did Japan, mainland China, Taiwan, and Germany and England. The Europe has only 2 countries because I was running out of time, so that was a good compromise there. But then, that time we didn't use the word sustainability. That time we were using the term green tourism, soft tourism, alternative tourism. And then those terms reflect our emphasis was on the resource retention, resource protection, rather than what is going around with the natural environment. So I think now, looking back, I think that's what Chris wanted me to think. So when I first proposed natural environment perception, and then in this book, I had the honor to do the section 3, which is titled Destination Impact and Sustainability. But then, if you please buy the book, and if you read the section, you realize the 3 of us are not really talking about natural environment protection anymore. Our sustainability has moved on from that point onward. And Lisa, you just saw her on screen, and Michelle, Lisa and Michelle, both of them in Australia, and their research is on indigenous tourism. and how to have indigenous people as main stakeholder to develop the destinations. And then when I teach indigenous tourism, I use their references quite often. And that idea is pretty new, because I'm going to explain how my interest in sustainability has changed over time. And one thing about, everyone talks about Chris is shy, Chris is very quiet, but I'm sure they agree he had a very distinct look when he was displeased. So, and then but he had such a character quality that when he asked us to do something, we feel like, yeah, I have to do it. He had a very magic touch of that. And then we realized, like, always looking backward, oh, he meant that for me. It's not for him to succeed as a supervisor, but that was for us to succeed as a researcher. So now I'm trying to emulate what he did for us, but it's really hard. Okay, so at the time, you may have seen this before, but when we start talking about sustainable development, 1972, the Stockholm Conference is considered to be the very first global conference on sustainability. But again, at that time, we were not using the term sustainability. We were talking about environmental conservation. And then only when it comes to 2000, we started using the word sustainability more liberally. And 2000, the United Nations Millennium Development Goal came. But MDG had only 7 goals, and then we didn't realize they were talking about human rights. Until when it comes to 2015, United Nations SDG, Sustainable Development Goals came. Now we have 17 goals, and every role is related to human rights. We didn't notice until we see the nice pretty picture Dimitrios showed us. But anyway, so this is a really quick development, sustainable development concept. And at the time I was doing my PhD, the 2001, no, 1991, 1991, we didn't even think about human rights and sustainability are related. So Amartya Sen in 1999 wrote a book, and that became the basis of human rights-based development. And human rights-based development became the basis of Millennium Development and Sustainable Development Goals. So until then, after year 2000, we didn't know human rights and sustainability are related so close to each other. And as you can see, each row is about human rights, right? But we are always thinking about sustainability is 13, 14, 15. It's natural environment protection, resource management. But then what Sustainable Development Goal is saying is if humans who are living in the environment are not flourishing, we are not doing right thing. So we are talking about, okay, so if you talk about the no hunger, okay, for human rights, we understand that. But then how does it relate to sustainable tourism development? We have to start thinking like that. And then we start thinking, okay, how to educate people in the local community that will help local community to have their own motivation and will to develop their location as a tourist destination if it's if they choose to. But at the same time, we cannot ignore economic development. If there is no decent job in the local areas, that's not good for the local people using tourism as a means of development. So we need economic development. And if we are not living in the clean environment, we will be sick and no one wants to come to this a dirty destination. So when we hear the word human rights, we automatically think about people on top. Yes, people are the main character in this concept, but people alone cannot stand alone. People cannot stand alone. Have to have healthy planet and healthy economy, prosperity, and then we have to have peace. Look at today, right now, tourism is quite badly impacted by the wars and strikes going on today, right? So we have to have peace time, or the tourism have to encourage more peace time to come. And the partnership, well, Carlos did the research, and Dimitrios did the research, the partnership, networking, that's something we must have to have holistic human rights protection. But I'm throwing, oh, it's already 10 minutes, okay. I'm throwing so much problematic issues to industry, tourism industry. Tourism industry doesn't want to think human rights, because sometimes the industry doesn't think human rights have to be the holistic relationship. They think it's too much work, too much money to protect human rights. But at the same time, I have the problem here. Human rights protection, human rights issues today are discussed based on United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Not every nation, not every society agree with that. We think it's a great idea, but some countries, some cultures disagree with UNUDHR. Okay? So if some people don't agree with UNUDHR, how do you convince those countries and societies you have to protect your people and you have to protect your visitors? Another thing is, human rights have to be incorporated in the legal format. If there is no law to protect human rights, even if you claim my human rights is violated, they have to be compensated. No one can help you. Government and police cannot help you. And each state is only responsible for their own citizens. So this makes things really hard. I was talking with an Adele today. In tourism, so many people, so many workers are migrant workers. People coming from foreign countries, different countries. How about their human rights? How do you protect it if the state is responsible for only its own citizens? Tourists are definitely not on their agenda, right? And law varies from different country to another. So the human rights law, protection law in Portugal is not exactly the same as that in, say, Russia, right? So if the laws are different, value or understanding of human rights are different from country to country, how can you help tourism and tourists protect their human rights and workers' rights? And one thing we often forget is human rights are not all equal, even in the UNUDHR. United Nations UDHR says there are absolute rights and qualified rights. Absolute rights is about life, human life and death. So anything that can kill a person, that's a violation of a human right. But qualified rights, something like, do we have rights of tourism? No, we don't. Do we have rights of mobility, freedom of mobility? During the peacetime, yes. But government can say under the national emergency, we are going to just ignore temporarily freedom of rights. They can do that. So we have to know which ones are absolute rights and which ones are qualified rights. And now individual rights. If the individual rights are not protected, we cannot move on to the next level, the solidarity rights. Okay, only in the society, individual human rights are protected, then we can start talking about national or the cultural groups' rights. So all these order of things we may not know. And extraterritorial protection of human rights. Okay, so the Portuguese are having great time in Canada on vacation, but something happened and this Portuguese person's human rights is violated. Who's going to help this Portuguese tourist in Canada? Does Portuguese government have agreement with Canadian government? They have a right of extraterritorial protection of their own citizens. If not, Portuguese government cannot go into Canada to protect the Portuguese tourists whose human rights was violated. So there are so many legal issues, political issues, and different laws, and many countries do not always agree with the UN UDHR, or they don't even agree with the international human rights law. So I'm throwing at all these difficult questions to the industries and the tourism related organizations. How do we deal with this problem? Now, I'm sorry, I'm going over time, so this is
It's okay. You are in Portugal, we are flexible.
Well, thanks to Dimitrios, and he showed the last conclusion section from Chris Cooper's chapter in this textbook. He said he will be like Stifler and Waldorf. These are the Muppets. And then looking over us like these two critics, sometimes applauding, sometimes head in the hands. And we always want thumbs up from Chris. So we worked really hard trying to carry on his will and his practice as a supervisor and an academic. And we want to be like Chris in the future. But so hopefully you can find a supervisor, you will meet the supervisor like that person who will guide you throughout your life, in your academic work and in your personal life. Thank you.
Well done.
Louise, you're next.
Where's Rodolfo?
Where's Rodolfo there?
It's okay, we go first with the people sitting here.
Yeah. Okay, Mary-Louise, come along.
They can jump. Well done. Like it better.
Only Vanessa. We only have Vanessa now, so.
So, you have been listening to a number of presentations, and I think we can draw some patterns from what has been said already. both about Chris Cooper as a person, as a supervisor, as a scholar, as a mentor, but also in terms of the science of tourism, researching tourism, and the idea of destination management. And some of these patterns are the fact that Chris Cooper always looked at tourism destination management through different lenses, through a multidisciplinary approach. So if you think about it, all the research that we've all done, I think, has this as a characteristic, right? I will explain what different disciplines I adopted in my PhD very soon. But there was another aspect which Professor Carlos Costa mentioned, which was that Chris was very much a macro thinker, right? But he didn't stop there. He looked at the micro dimensions as well. Why? Because the macro dimension creates the right environment, or at least it should, create the right environment for the micro level operations to function, to be profitable, but also to make a positive difference for the people, both for tourists, both for the employees, as well as for the residents, right? So this brings everything together. And policy is really what, at a macro level, for destinations does. And my PhD was specifically about evidence-based policy making, achieving destination competitiveness in the Mediterranean. So I looked at Malta, Spain, and Cyprus. But I'll come to that a bit later. My contribution in the book, the Tourism Destination Management book, edited by Carlos and Buhalis and Dimitrios, so thank you for that, is about evidence-based policy making and knowledge management. And the idea behind evidence-based policy making is a distinction from opinion-based policy making. A lot of policy, especially in tourism, is done as a consequence of different lobbying happening with the decision maker, with the policy maker, or a reaction to market developments, our understanding of what is happening in the market, or the industry's understanding of what is happening in the market, without really understanding the real implications of what is happening. So, evidence-based policy making is, and we have I put up a definition there just to make sure this concept is clear, though it isn't actually. But Davis gave us a definition saying it's a rigorous approach that gathers, critically appraises, and uses high-quality research evidence to inform policymaking and professional practice. But what actually happens, so in the literature, if we see the evidence-based literature, we see that there is a certain level of understanding or a commonality, which is you're using rigorous scientific research to do policy. But different scholars also refer to other types of evidence, such as political judgment, such as the experience of people who work in the industry, the entrepreneurs, the operators. And in fact, Blum and Patton say that it is not entirely clear what these two concepts of evidence and policy mean in the policy literature. So what was happening was that in the early 2000s, in that decade, there was literature being produced including by Professor Chris Cooper, by Lisa, who was with us a few moments ago, about knowledge management. And their argument was, you need to use knowledge, but not within your single organization only, but at a broader level. And transferring that knowledge so that you can use it in order to achieve competitiveness. So this was one side of the literature, specifically in the tourism literature. At the same time, in the same period, within the policy literature, there was this concept being discussed about evidence-based policy making. But in that policy literature, there was never any reference to tourism policy, or to the tourism sector, or to tourism policy making. Similarly, in the tourism literature, there was nothing about evidence-based policy making. So there was a very evident gap. What was happening, though, was that there was also the economics literature. And for decades, we have always seen that econometrics, all the modeling, gave us something, gave us that scientific, the idea of a science to try and understand what is happening in the market, to try and understand tourism demand, for example. And if you read economics papers with econometrics and all of that, like in Tourism Economics Journal, you will see that very often the conclusion is that this is relevant for policy. Yes, but how? How can we use it, right? So there isn't much of that. And also, there isn't much in terms of, but what difference did that policy make? Can this model give us something about that? And a lot of the focus is about the model specification, as opposed to, so how do we use this? What comes out from this? Okay? So my PhD, which was not in its entirety supervised by Professor Chris Cooper, because I started my PhD with Professor Thea Sinclair at the University of Nottingham. And unfortunately, halfway through my PhD, she had a terrible accident and she passed away, very, very suddenly. 2 days before, she had signed my suspension of studies paper because I was pregnant with my first son eventually. So it obviously was a shock. So don't assume your supervisor will always be there either. So at that point then, once my suspension passed, I had a decision to make. Do I continue? What am I going back to? Right? But thankfully, the University of Nottingham was extremely professional and supportive with this. And Professor Chris Cooper was then in Nottingham. He took over the Christel Dahman Institute after Professor Thea Sinclair passed away. And he spent about 2 years in Nottingham. It was around 2008, 2009, somewhere around that period. And Chris took me over. You know, he was very, very, very understanding of the situation. But what Chris did, and at that stage, my dissertation was very much an economics, a tourism economics dissertation, very much about the econometrics, etc. Whilst I can do that, I wasn't feeling too excited about it. And I wanted to bring in the policy considerations. In parallel, I was working full-time back in Malta on tourism policy itself for Malta. So of course I was like having all of this in my mind and trying to bridge everything. And in my PhD, therefore, I brought the tourism field, of course, the economics field, but also the policy literature. And I tried to analyze what difference did the tourism policy which Malta adopted, what difference did it make to consumer behavior, to the choices which tourists from the UK market did in terms of will they go to Malta, will they go to Cyprus, will they go to Spain? Because those were the three countries which I was looking at. And I used the AIDS model, I used hedonic pricing model, so I looked at both the macro and the micro level. And I illustrated what difference this use of scientific research can make for tourism policy. And in those discussions with Chris, we used to talk about, but why isn't there literature about this on the use of evidence? There is a lot of evidence out there, but why isn't it so much packaged in this way? What can destinations do? And at that time, the literature on evidence-based policy making was very much about the barriers and the facilitators for the use of evidence. Since then, the literature has evolved, and it is now very much about the relationship between the researcher and the policymaker, the translations that we need to do in order to use the same language as the policymaker, if we are the scientist, the practices of the use of knowledge and of creating knowledge and co-producing knowledge, not only as researchers, but also with the industry. And very slowly, after my own PhD, which I finalized in 2011, only like 8 years after, did we start seeing literature on evidence-based policymaking in tourism. But very often, this is related to something very specific, not at a destination level, so not like Malta's tourism policy or Cyprus tourism policy or Portugal's tourism policy, but about something very specific like event management. Right? So there certainly is a gap there which we can continue to work on. From my own personal research, I have mainly focused on two aspects. One is policy design informed by evidence. So for example, what can destination management organizations, what structures, what systems, what conditions do they need to create in order for scientific evidence to be used for policy making? And I'm doing comparative studies also within small island states. Why? Because a lot of the literature on the evidence and evidence-based policy making is about the big countries. But big countries have much more resources than we do, right? What I used to do when I used to work at the Malta Tourism Authority on policy, our colleagues in Germany, in France, in the UK, whatever, there would be a team of at least 6 people. And I'm doing everything, you know? So the resources are extremely limited. So there must be something to unpack there in terms of, are there any differences? The second element is, therefore, creating a framework for evidence-based policy making. And again, how do you operate this? The other element I'm looking at is this relationship between tourism policy, destination competitiveness, and development. So what difference does it make? Here you've got just a bit of a teaser about the findings from Malta. It already gives you an indication that there is a difference between a small country and larger countries. So for example, we have a hierarchy of evidence, right, which is very much informed by evidence-based medicine, but in smaller countries, we mainly work with tourism statistics, which is only there to measure performance. It doesn't tell us much about the future. So these are issues that we need to look at. Having said that, people working on policy are eager to use evidence, scientific evidence, but they may not have the required resources, or they need to take quick action, so they will not have the time to do this. So they often try to draw from evidence from abroad, right, having similar contexts. So there are four main areas for, I think, in this field that we can have in terms of a future research agenda. One is the epistemology of evidence for tourism policy. Are there differences between this for tourism and other areas? The second element is the nature and production of evidence for tourism policy. So, are tourism statistics for performance management sufficient for policy, or should there be other forms of evidence? Certainly there should be, no? And what are the possibilities for co-creation and distribution of that evidence? Okay. And this is where knowledge management comes in, which is what Chris was contributing to and what he wrote about for at least 14 years, from 2004 to 2018 at least. If we have that knowledge, we cannot just keep it to ourselves, but we need to distribute it and share it, even with the industry, right? But a lot of the literature talks about the scientist and the policymaker. But in tourism even more, it's important to have the communities, the residents, and the industry. We can't do much without those two main communities. And ultimately, the fourth area is, what does evidence-based policymaking make a real difference for tourism outcomes? This is something which has not really been explored. So, Chris's arguments in terms of this knowledge was mainly give access to knowledge, remove barriers to knowledge transfer and adoption, encourage the private sector to also share its own knowledge. The private sector has loads of knowledge as well. And foster and protect that knowledge generation, because then we can have knowledge-based innovation. So it's not knowledge for the sake of knowledge, but because you can do something about it. So this is very much what I've written in that chapter in the book. So if you're interested, of course, you can read the details from there. They're saying, buy it in a different way. So I'd like to thank Professor Dimitrios, Buhalis, and Professor Chris Cooper. So thank you for going to that place and doing whatever you do and coming up with this idea of this book. It helped, I think, us accepting that Chris actually passed away. So that was, thank you very much. Thank you, Sally, for taking this on as well. Your guidance, I think, makes a difference. And how can you use this book, actually, right? Because we're here telling you to buy it, right? But really, it's because of this knowledge creation, it's also because of this knowledge sharing, right? And if you have a look at the contents, those are the three main areas. These are critical research areas which the tourism industry needs to look at, right? And the policy decisions need to look at those as well if we want to manage our destinations. Okay? And they do talk to each other. So don't see the chapters simply as individual chapters, but look at how they talk to each other. Draw the parallels between them. The obvious one is, as I said before, the multidisciplinarity. And Chris Cooper, if I had to what were the 5 main elements which he wrote about? He wrote about the complexity of tourism, the complex system tourism is. He wrote about the adaptive capacity that destinations need to have. It's not only in terms of having the beds, having the restaurants, having the attractions, etc., but also having the knowledge, the capacity to explore even more and understand better, especially so that we can be prepared when the industry faces crisis. Because if you think about it, tourism is all the time facing crisis. And we know that there will be crisis. What we don't know is when and the nature of that crisis, right? So we really need to be prepared and, maybe also have some scenario planning. But to do all this, you need effective governance, okay? And that governance needs to have the various players and the networks which are changing, as Dimitrios was saying. So knowledge capability is the other area which obviously Chris mentioned. So the book provides for each chapter what we know, it reviews some of the literature, and that is obviously important in terms of the knowledge, the concepts, and the ideas. That's very important for the students, for scholars, policymakers, and industry. Every chapter then goes into what we still need to know, so that again is setting some research agendas for us scholars and students. And the third element is what we need to do. Okay, so not just what we need to know, but what we need to do to make that difference. That's Chris Cooper, drawing some parallels. He was certainly a scholar, he was a mentor, he was a leader, but he had a gentle presence as well. I used to receive emails from him in reply to my emails, and they would very often be very short to the point. And I would say, what exactly does he want to tell me? So I would really think about it. So he had this skill of writing a very complicated answer in maybe 2 sentences, right? Because Chris would not give you the answer. Chris would give you a map, right? And tell you, now find your way. And that is something which I really value, right? Because maybe me using the map he gives me, I would go to policy, but someone else might go to econometrics, right? So you have to find your own path. So thank you, Chris, from all of us, and let's continue.
Professor Adele.
You were probably the last person who saw Chris.
No, I can always see you. Even from here. Sorry.
You did tell me the joke.
But that then will tell you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everybody here and those listening online. Just to start, Carlos, thank you very much for hosting us. It's a real privilege to be here, so thank you. If you have a look at that title slide, you'll see that what I've chosen to present to you this afternoon, which is something about my research, but also as a tribute to Chris, is called A Career Perspective. And I've chosen that deliberately, and I've chosen it for two reasons. The first reason is that's where I started my research journey. So my PhD, what seems like quite a long time ago now, was looking at the career paths of hotel managers in the United Kingdom. So career analysis and careers were where I started my research journey. Secondly, I think it's to highlight the importance of mentors throughout your career. So we've talked about it in terms of supervision and how you use your advisors, but how this actually carries through to what we do throughout our career. Now, for many of you PhD students, you're just beginning, and that's great. But you know, there's a whole lifetime ahead of you, and you'll find that people are there to help and support you along the way. So that's the rationale for taking a career perspective. Now, I've got 3 quotes from Chris, and this is the first one. And on there it says, "Don't go back to geography, stick with tourism, it's more fun." And Chris said that to me sometime in 1996. Now, Chris had got the measure of me by this time. He knew that I was more likely to do something if I thought it was going to be fun. Was he right? Absolutely. So I decided to plump for this academic career, and I decided to stick with tourism. Now, the reason Chris said this to me is because I was a geographer by training. So my undergraduate degree was in human geography, and I previously worked as a travel agent in the days when we had shops and, a bit like Dimitrios, no computers. We just called up reservation agents. So I always thought geography and travel was going to be my thing. But I was fortunate enough to be offered a scholarship to study tourism management at the University of Surrey for a master's level, and that was where I first met Chris. And then again, fortunate to be offered a scholarship to study in a human resources management area under Professor Michael Riley. So I was in this sort of dilemma. What do I do? I thought I was a geographer, and I, some reason, thought, well, I think I'm going to stick with an academic career. Couldn't really see anyone else who's going to give me a job by this point. I've become so ingrained as a researcher. But what was I going to do? And so Chris said, go stick with tourism, much more fun. The reason I tell you this is early on, those decisions and my sort of first bit of the career path really cemented me into certain theoretical approaches. And so from my human geography background, I was interested in people and mobility right from day one. And so that fermented and really set the seed for me in terms of theoretically issues around mobility and migration. I was interested in people's movements around the globe. So that was one of my sort of fundamental theoretical approaches. Through doing my PhD, I ended up looking at human resources management, which wasn't me. I didn't see that as where I'd started from, but of course it resonated and connected with people's opportunities for mobility if it's dependent on their education. And so that then, those career theories and that career theoretical perspective from careers and HRM combined with my migration and mobility and really set me on a particular academic journey. So I've got a number of research areas, and they're perhaps a little bit clearer to see on the next slide. So if I think about my career that's now spanned as an academic probably the best part of 30 years, where I think I've contributed is to a body of knowledge around tourism work and employment. And it came in various stages. As I say, it began with looking at the career paths of hotel managers, which sounds almost sounds a little bit lame now, but at the time it was about how we understood how people develop skills, how those acquisitions followed them throughout their lifetime, and also importantly where they learned and where they were trained to do a particular job. And it came about because industry was looking at ways to rationalise career development for people. So it was essentially saying, what do they really need to know? What do we really need to do? That was the career part of it. Then when I started thinking more about careers and the opportunity it gives us for mobility, that sort of took me into the journey of looking at migrant workers. And it's a bit of a misperception if we say that, you know, we think of migrant workers as all being perhaps not very educated, perhaps low skilled, many of them are, but there's also a set of migrants that move for different reasons, to improve their education experiences, to learn new languages, lots of reasons that people migrate. But in tourism and hospitality, of course, it's always been the tap, that labour supply tap that we turn on when we can't find local people to do the jobs. And it's a global phenomenon. It's particularly prevalent in the UK. We've serviced our hospitality industry in particular through migrant workers for many years. And it's came to a real, I suppose the issue was forced with COVID. That's when it really made people start to think about what happens when that mobility tap is turned on. So I was interested in looking at migrant workers and their experiences. Some positive, a lot negative, and the opportunities that did give people in terms of their human capital development. That sort of led me into a path where I was looking at mobile working more broadly, and particularly the interface with technology. And we see a lot in the tourism literature now how work is increasingly hard to divorce from leisure, and how mobile workers and digital nomads are now moving around and shaping destinations in a different way. So still mobility, but not quite the same as I was before. More recently, I guess looking at those experience of people working away from home and some of the challenges that brings, brought me around to thinking more and more about workers and well-being. And if you look at public health literature, nothing to do with tourism, you will see that actually having a job is good for you. So all the indicators from health perspective say that work is good for us. And that kind of resonates. It is. If we're employed, if we've got access to communities, we're engaged in a work environment, that's generally good for our well-being. Unless, of course, the job has certain detrimental characteristics. One of the key ones that makes people feel bad about their workplace is work precarity and insecurity. And if you're a mobile worker, that's one of the key challenges. Coming back to Atsuko and your human rights. So that in a nutshell is where I've sort of developed. It sounds very quick, it took 30 years, but that was where my research came from. Alongside of that, of course, and I will just mention, is tourism education. And I think Chris was a really excellent educator. And because of his research profile, it's perhaps something that we didn't think about too much, but he was a really good scholar and a really good teacher, really inspirational. And you've heard others say how good he was at PhD supervision. And I, along with what I learned from Chris and my supervisor, have tried to emulate that. So I'm quite keen on the development of doctoral education, and that's part of where my research is now, is to looking at doctoral provision and the code of practice and how that can be made better. So if you've got any complaints, you can let me know. I'll write it into what I do there. Second quote from Chris, and this was sometime in the early 2000s. Human resources are rarely high on the agenda in destination management. Maybe you can put that right. Well, really kind of him to think I was that influential. Really nice of him to say I could put that right. I'm not sure that I have put it right, but certainly what I do is every opportunity I have is to try and raise the profile and the importance of the people that work or who make a living from tourism and hospitality. So of course I'm doing that exactly now. So when I can, I try and raise the profile. And this comes back to today's session about destination management. And it seems incredulous to me, and Chris was absolutely right, and I found no evidence to dispute this, but really interesting that people aren't really what you think about when you think of destinations and the planning and the management. That workforce is really low down, yet they are critical to obviously serving the industry, but a really important characteristic of that destination. And this slide behind me, when we think about the identity of a destination, we've got where you stay, where you eat, how you get there, what the climate's like, what there is to do, what educational opportunities, what activities, all these fabulous things about destinations. But the people that work and live in those places are a key aspect about that identity. And if we're talking about the workforce, that's both permanent workers and transient workers. And some of you, if you're from smaller islands, and this will probably resonate with Maria, the demography changes completely during that tourist season as to whether you are hiring the seasonal workforce. And it was Chris that really got me to think about tourism, work and employment in that destination context. So that has sort of been where the direction has headed over the last few years. One of the things I do with my students, postgraduate tourism students, and they're from all over the world, which gives us a great opportunity. And I always say to them, think about a destination you know well. Somewhere that you really love, maybe somewhere you've been on holiday, you've had a fabulous time, or maybe it's home if you're away from home, but a destination that's really familiar to you. At this point, I say close your eyes and think about it. So I'm giving you the excuse to shut your eyes now for 5 minutes if you want to, but no longer, because I'm aware, you know, it's getting a little bit late in the afternoon. And I say think about that place and think about the accommodation that's there, the food that's there, the drink that's there, how you get there, what the infrastructure's like, what there is to do. Imagine that destination and all the things that you love about it, but it's got no people in it. It's got other tourists, it's got all that infrastructure, but it's got no workers. And then I say, if we had the opportunity, how could we ensure that the tourism workforce has a better opportunity and is treated more fairly now? What could we do if we had that blank slate with all these fabulous things in our destination and we could go back to the beginning so that we could ensure employee welfare was better? What would we do? We had an opportunity after COVID and we blew it. So we said we would do things differently, we didn't. Tourism came back quickly, just the same, with all the same conditions, sometimes a little bit worse. But these are the things that I think about now. So the first one is have a holistic perspective about the workforce, and that means consider everybody that's in formal employment and informal employment. So all those people that don't figure on the radar because they are not in contracted, secure, employed jobs. So the formal sector and the informal sector. And also people who make a living from tourism, but again don't appear on those formal labour statistics. They're there they make money out of tourism, but they are not recognised as formal employees. Implement policies that look at fair work, and there's a lot of research now and a lot of narrative around the fair work agenda, which was actually developed for gig workers, not specifically tourism, but it's a useful framework to use and it fits within the SDGs as well. So fair pay, conditions, contracts, management and fair representation. And in my research over the years, probably one of the biggest issues is a lack of voice for those invisible workers because they're not contracted, they don't have a union say, and so who hears their concerns and who supports them? And work across multiple agencies, and this really resonates with the destination perspective because I've begun to realise that many of the challenges with work and employment in tourism and hospitality is there's quite often nowhere for people to live, and as costs rise, and we see this everywhere, we've seen it in Aveiro, you know, where do our not very well paid service workers actually live? How do they get to work? How good is the transport? What accommodation options are available? And we're just beginning from a policy perspective to get tourism people to talk to infrastructure people, to talk to the road planners, to talk to accommodation providers, so that this becomes recognised that if we're to improve things, it has to be a much more organised stakeholder collaboration. Build opportunities for education and skill development. You'd expect me to say that. I'm an educator, but no education is wasted, believe me, even if it feels expensive at the time. Support organisations to promote well-being within their companies. When I give this talk to organisations and I say you need to try and improve well-being, they look at me like, you're kidding, we're not doing anything that costs us any money. We haven't got the money. Employee well-being costs nothing. The things that you can do that are free are good leadership, good communication and a supportive environment. It costs nothing, and it will improve your employee well-being. Happier workers, obviously good for them, and if you're being really hard-nosed, good for profits as well. And then future-focused, and Dimitrios has talked about AI. I'm not sure where it's heading. It's certainly changing the nature of some jobs, not all of them. Interestingly, it's affecting middle management jobs more at the moment. But where is that taking us? And that shift and that sort of blurring of that work-leisure boundaries. You know, will that idea that we go to work and then we have our leisure time for many of us completely be eroded with the technology that enables us to be constantly on the move and in time? Final quote from Chris, and he said, this was only 2024, so more recent. I've been doing quite a few projects recently relating to tourism and climate change in tourism destinations. So that was what Chris was interested in, and he'd done work in Croatia and Slovenia, and I'm sure other places as well. And he said to me, no one's really thinking about the workers. And so I thought, so there I go, start looking, searching through the databases, remembering my old skills, getting on Google Scholar. Somebody must be talking about the workers. And I said, you're right, Chris, nobody's talking about it. Now there's a growing body of literature around tourism and climate change, which some of you may know, but very little in terms of the implications for the tourism and hospitality workers, beyond seasonality. So as climate shifts and seasons change, that's one aspect. But what about the health of those workers? Talking to Maria earlier, when you talk about Malta, how hot it's getting. You know, if your job is to serve gin and tonics or beers or coffee to people, and you are walking over really hot beaches for a 12-hour shift, what's that doing to you physically? If you're in a crisis situation, and we see this more and more, flooding, heavy rains, tourists get stuck in a hotel, the workers are stuck there as well. Not only are they concerned for themselves, but their family, but they're also expected to still look after the tourists in those establishments. And so this seems to me to be lacking currently in part of that tourism and climate change research, which is excellent, but it's not looking at the workers. So this is what I've taken up. This is my latter part of my career development and where I currently am. And I've started to conceptually think about this with some really nice colleagues in Slovenia. And Chris said we need to put a marker down so that people know we're thinking about it. So we did. We wrote a perspective paper, which was published, thank you very much, Dimitrios, in Tourism Review. That came out last year, and this is where we've got with it. Now, unfortunately, Chris is not with us any longer to help us on this journey, but it's a really exciting project, and this is where we'll be carrying on. So that's where I am in the current stage of my career. Now, my final slide, it just says, because it's about careers, like a bunch of stuff on the right-hand side. You would expect me to have done this, given that I've got grey hair and I've been around a long time. It's just part of building an academic career. It doesn't really matter. What really matters is that you pick up some fantastic mentors along the way, and I've been really lucky. I've had some great mentors, and I still have, of which, of course, Chris was one of them. So my heartfelt thanks to Chris, and I've put Anne Geraldine, who's Chris's wife, who fed me lots of nice dinners, kept me company on trips, and allowed me to take up far too much of her husband's time. So, thank you very much.
Oh, Dave. Well, hello, Dave. Dave.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to thank Carlos and Dimitrios as well for inviting me to come along and present. Today what I'd like to do this afternoon is to talk a little bit about some of the research that we've been doing with Atsuko, Hashimoto and I. We've been doing in Japan for about the last 25 years and kind of try and relate it to some of the things that Carlos was talking about on destination management and sustainability issues. And then I'll talk a little bit about, toward the end, some of the work where I'm at now in terms of rethinking tourism across a range of different fronts, so some of the other work that I've been doing. So I'll take you through some of these slides. But to start off with, I just wanted to put out a quote from the book. I think it's pretty important to, the field of tourism owes a great deal to him. Not only for the journals he founded, the textbooks he authored, or the policy he helped shape, but the people he inspired. And a couple other sentences, his vision for tourism was one that embraced the complexity, encouraged interdisciplinarity, and demanded rigor and humanity. Through every PhD supervised, every conference keynote delivered, and every textbook revised, Chris left behind a legacy that is both scholarly and deeply personal. And while I must admit I was not a student of Professor Cooper's, I'd like to take a moment and talk a little bit about the wider debt that many of us owe him within the Tourism Academy literature. The books, the conferences, we would meet him at different events and so on, and just really valuable. And I can remember one key exchange with Chris. It was in the middle of COVID. Everybody was locked down, dark days, and wondering what's going to happen next. And I got this email out of the blue from Chris, and can you review this paper on COVID-19 and tourism? And it was great just to talk to him at that point in time. It just kind of lifted the energy and just get back to work and that kind of thing. So it was really valuable, just the interactions that we had. So while I wasn't a student or conducted research projects with him, his body of work and his knowledge and my work with Atsuko as well, I think we all owe him this great debt that we'd like to kind of repay, and I think this book goes a long way to that. I guess I want to say one other thing too, in terms of his legacy. I want to put this out there. In preparing this talk, I went back and I started to look through some of the books and things and articles that I had written, and I started to look through the references and I thought, and what I saw was Cooper, Costa, Buhalis. And there's the sort of the legacy there being used by different researchers around the world. So thanks to you as well. But what I wanted to do, just take a few moments and kind of link into some of the things that Carlos talked about and this whole idea of destination sustainability, and show you some of the projects that we've been working on in Japan, and some really interesting things. I think there's some parallels too with Portugal I'm going to try and bring in here as well. What we see at the top here, just a couple of sentences on some background here, that the World Health Organization states that a society is super aging society if 20% of the population is over 65. And Japan has close to 30% of its population over 65. And I was doing some reading last night, and Portugal has just under 22% of its population under 65. So it too falls into the category of super aging. I think it fits within the top 5 oldest aging countries in the world, along with Japan. And so we were looking at this and doing some of the research in the rural areas and about destination management in some of these places. And you see the picture on the bottom there. With that, we have in Japan people leaving this rural areas and moving to the cities, looking for that job, right? And so you're left with the rural environment. And the bottom picture there, you see overgrown leaves into a house, right? And tons of abandoned buildings all throughout Japan in the rural environment. And so people is leaving, abandoned homes. Children are not looking after the homes as their parents move into nursing homes and so on or pass away, and they're just abandoned and so on. And so we're sort of looking at how is this impacting? And one of the projects that we were sort of looking at was interesting. If you look at the top, a couple of pictures here in the village of Nagaro. And what we have here are life-size dolls or scarecrows. The very first person to make one of these, she put a scarecrow in her backyard to scare away the birds, keep them away from her garden. And then she was asked by a neighbor, can you make a scarecrow of my friend? And they put it in front of her house. She had passed away, and so there is the scarecrow. And then another family moved away, and so they made a life-size doll of all the family and put it in front of the house as more and more people left the environment. And they kept doing this and adding more and more scarecrows, or they're more like life-size dolls as opposed to scarecrows, and just populated the whole environment around there. The school is empty, but it's not. Every desk and chair has a student. That student, though, is a life-size doll. And throughout the whole environment, you walk down the street and you see people in the fields, you look and that is a life-size doll. And it's completely changed the environment. And so it's to the point now where these life-size dolls actually outnumber local residents. And so the challenge for the environment here is how does the business of living and how the government deals with these remote rural communities as they continue to disappear. But this becomes a project of local innovation, development, and strategies of building a destination marketing project, because this is flocked to by tourists. It's on YouTube. It's if you look at it, it's everywhere. It's quite interesting. So this whole idea of local entrepreneurial innovation really driving something that you never thought would happen. But it's been based with the whole idea of local participation and what's going on. What is the local story that's being told? This time it's about degrowth. This is a disappearing community, yet it's an attempt to try and hang on, and it's kind of revived itself as it went through. Yeah, just sort of big concepts here about how can we take destination management and link it in and make it successful and drive entrepreneurial innovation. Again, in the Ia Valley on the left-hand side, you see the abandoned homes that are everywhere in different rural environments. But this becomes an abandoned home turned into a luxurious tourist accommodation. So on the right-hand side, it looks like a thatched roof cottage, but in reality, inside that is one of the most high-end accommodation establishments that you could stay in. And so it's this whole notion of using heritage as a destination rejuvenation tool and looking at how that can come about. And about marketing nostalgia. What is it about leaving the urban environment and getting to the rural environment? Where do things grow? How do vegetables grow? And learning about that. And just revitalizing the whole community. And Kaminka cafes. So these are the old buildings you see on the left. These Kaminka buildings are being turned into all kinds of cafes, museums, all kinds of special events. But they had the heritage building on the outside, really something inside. But this particular project is interesting because it was driven by an outside grouping of people. So I'm going to come back to that in a few minutes, but this notion of outsider versus inside in a community, sometimes it takes somebody from the outside to come in with an idea and elevate it and get it running. In this case, this is where that went through. Again, these are projects over sort of a 25-year scan of research that Atsuko and I have been doing, and just kind of picking a few different projects to kind of talk about how destination sustainability and management can come about. Over here, again, the importance of partnerships. Carlos talked about networking and this whole idea of collaboration. So we're going to talk about two things here. On the left-hand side, we have the Sugar Road collaboration, and come back to Portugal for a few moments here. You see a Portuguese ship in Nagasaki in the 17th century. This map here on the bottom left-hand corner would be where Nagasaki is. And this whole idea of developing this, during the Edo period, you may have heard of the Edo period in Japan, that's about 1600 to 1868. The Japanese government shut the country down to all foreigners. No one could get in. And where the only place you could get in was through Nagasaki and a small island off the coast of Dejima Island. And through that, it was the Portuguese came bringing sugar. And they arrived with boatloads of sugar. And they transported that, and then it hit in the bottom left-hand corner and worked its way up through the highway up towards Tokyo. And this particular part of road is becoming called the Sugar Road. And the heritage and the history, and we think about products from Portugal, Castella, bolos, all of those tempura, that came from Portugal. And you see it on this map. And so communities, small rural communities are specializing in these products, like Castella from a certain area, or bolos from a certain area, So you get food, identity, region, history, heritage as a branding identity coming in here. And you can see the official logo is a sugar cube there on the top right. And so you've got government involvement. And you walk into a train station and you can see the Sugar Road products on a map. And again, it's this collaborative effort from outsiders and insiders trying to bring that together. Second sort of partnership heritage trail on the right-hand side is the Tokaido Road. So during the Edo period, the shogun decided to build these roads throughout all of Japan. And part of it was to bring the lords from different areas of Japan and come to Tokyo, and then they had to reside in Tokyo for a period of time. And they had to arrive on huge, giant, make sure I'm not running over, huge caravans of people bringing the lord to Tokyo where they would reside. Some people argue they also kept them held hostage in Tokyo because they had to reside there. Anyway, these road systems were built all over Japan. And the top right picture you see is an wood ink print. And you may have seen the Great Wave, that's a classic print. And so there's different authors or artists, they created these wood ink prints, all the different main stations along the Tokaido Road. The Tokaido Road ran from the home of the emperor in Kyoto to the home of the shogun in Tokyo, and moving along that pathway. And so when you moved along that pathway, you had to stop and show your passport, like you do today, to get through a checkpoint, which is at the bottom here. They found the plans for this specific checkpoint, they redid the whole thing and built it from the knowledge they had not that many years ago. So again, this whole idea of collaboration, networks, partnership to build this identity of a heritage trail on here. Another thing, again, these are sort of key concepts that we've kind of learned over the years, looking at the importance of community connections and who are we talking about here. So one of the projects that we did, again, across the whole range of things, we've done interviews, focus groups, key informed interviews, site visits, a whole range of methodologies to kind of figure out what's happening in these communities. And so looking at it, in this particular case, we're interviewing aging rural farmers and how they can become involved in tourism and the benefit that can bring to the local community. So we have working in farmers markets, bed and breakfasts, and souvenir making. So you work all day on the farm, then you would head to the farmer's market, help out there, then you go back to the farm, work there, or you'd have open a bed and breakfast at the farm, and then learning about how to deal with tourists, how to deal with the tourism industry. The government's providing training programs for local entrepreneurs on here. But it's out of this whole other dynamic complex here of socialization for those who were isolated rural female farmers, who got together with other rural female farmers and formed this bond of group of even just making souvenirs and selling them, or once a week or a couple of times a week to see my friends. And it gave them a source of income as well. And some of this is going back in time, the traditional gender roles where the husband would have the bank account and the husband would have the credit card. But now these 70-year-old females all of a sudden have their own bank account and making money. And so it really changed the whole dynamic here. So there's empowerment, and they're learning regions, because at 70, learning something new, how to deal with tourists. And again, so as we try different things, in the middle picture, if you look way in the back corner, that's me trying to help these ladies harvest cabbages, not doing a very good job, and they're laughing at me, telling me what to do. But again, it was interesting, we saw in-group versus out-group. So within a group around a common village, they work together collaboratively. But over the mountain in the next village, they work together. But how do you get those two groups across the mountains to form something else? That was one of the challenges that we did find within that. But again, just small, little, tiny environments here. And the last one is talking about things that talked about, Professor Buhalis talked about, innovation and also technology. So anime tourism in Japan is taking off, and it's not just Japan, it's happening around the world in different places, anime tourism. And so looking at just a couple, on the left-hand side, it is a city called Hita, and the anime called Attack on Titan. That is where the author is from. And he formed a partnership with the town to develop Attack on Titan anime tourism. They raised enough money to get money to build bronze statues. And the story behind it is the community lives in in a city surrounded by walls, and they're being attacked by monsters or titans. So within the city, they've had a dam, so they put the statues of the main characters looking up at the dam, and if you pull up your phone, you can activate augmented reality and see the titan attacking over the dam and over the wall. And so they have recreated this whole experience in Hita, where nothing was there. So again, we label this sort of inventing tradition and just make something up of anime tourism and how really clever that whole thing and technological change. So we're seeing, again, collaboration between anime producers, local governments, companies, production companies. They're recreating environments in the real world that take place in the anime world so that you consume the anime product, and it just attracts by the thousands. New museums are there, and it's completely revolutionized it. The one on the right, bottom right, is Suzume. I'll just very quickly hit that. It's an anime story about a young girl and a three-legged stool who's racing across Japan. There's a whole map of Japan here behind them from Kyushu, and they're heading up to Tohoku region where in 311 the earthquake, tsunami, and then the nuclear accident happened, and she's trying to get up there where her mother lost her life. And as she goes through, you see different products, you see different places, and people follow that in real life and follow her journey and get on the ferry that she was on. And again, so product placement, identity, culture, branding, marketing, all really sort of comes together here. But it's, again, sort of looking at these things in over 25 years, and these are just a few samples sort of things, it's all not a pretty picture, as some of the panelists had mentioned, right? And so if you look at just Japanese towns sour on crowds coming to see the cherry blossoms and Mount Fuji. If you look at the numbers, they're staggering. Tourism to Japan is just going through the roof. Currently they have approximately 40 million a year. Their target is 60 million a year by 2030. That's not that far away. And so the volume is just staggering where they want to go with this. And so if I step away from my Japanese research and kind of link into some of the other presentations about what I've been doing, is sort of looking at where tourism is. And I had the chance to work with Richard Sharpley on this book of rethinking tourism across a range of things. And kind of based on the article or a quote by Steger and James saying that, you know, this whole idea of rethinking tourism in the context of the great unsettling which we were in, starting in COVID-19, but looking at tourism in the context of climate change, overconsumption, where Japan is heading, and sustainability and different elements or types of sustainability and how we kind of map that out, insecurity, instability, and inequality across a range of things. So that's kind of some of the areas that I've been working at. I can talk to you later if anybody wants a little bit more. But again, just step away a bit from the Japanese research, but looking at tourism as a whole, my area is kind of more on tourism and development thinking. And just kind of a concluding thought here, again, I would just to finish off, I would like to thank this picture from Inventour in 2024 of the Three Musketeers here. I think our task here is really to just pay it forward. Just a few weeks ago, a student in my class back in Canada, an undergraduate class, came up to me and was asking me about a project. And he was looking at something on Blackpool, and automatically I just said, look at the work of Chris Cooper. I never thought anything about it, I just look at the work of Chris Cooper. And then a week or so later, Carl said, can you talk about Chris Cooper? I thought, I just did. Right? And just this whole idea of really paying it forward, of what he taught all of these people, and me indirectly, that we need to kind of take that and keep that going. So I'll end it there, but thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much.
Last but not least.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Thanks. Hi. I won't keep you very long. I'm aware it's very late. And I also want to say I'm not going to tell you about any research. I'm not a researcher. I'm not an academic. I'm a publisher. And so this presentation is something quite personal to me, really, when Carlos and Dimitrios kindly, thank you for your kind invitation. And also, I'm not usually up here. I'm usually there.
Yeah.
It's very personal about my experience and my work with Chris generally, and what his impact had on me. So to begin, I first met Chris in 1998 when I'd just taken on the much loved and respected tourism list at Butterworth Hyman Publishers, which was part of Elsevier. I've had the list passed on to me by our publishing director, Catherine Grant, who Chris also mentions in the book. And I felt very honoured to be taking over the reins of a truly exciting and growing list from her knowledgeable and very capable hands. One of the best-selling books on the list was Worldwide Destinations by Chris Cooper and Brian Boniface. This was first published in 1987 as The Geography of Travel and Tourism. A new edition was planned, so I was tasked with going to meet one of the authors, Chris Cooper. So I nervously got into my tiny Peugeot 105 with a big map book. This was the days before we had sat-nav and Google Maps, and I still have got a very poor sense of direction, and so would often be whizzing around the same roundabout multiple times. Anyway, eventually I got to meet Chris Cooper. We were due to meet at the Royal Bath Hotel. Still there, you'll recognise it. A very grand and traditional seafront hotel. I was very impressed. I thought, wow, how swanky. These tourism professors certainly know how to live. So I arrived a bag of nerves, trying to brave it out, probably failing miserably, and walked into the foyer brandishing our Butterworth Hyman catalogue, because obviously the days before we all have profile pictures online, I had no idea what Chris looked like from he, me. So we found each other after a while, and Chris instantly put me at ease. As has been said before, he had a kind and welcoming, gentle manner, a very dry sense of humour, and it made our conversation easy. We were soon beginning to talk about the book in detail and ideas for a new edition. As has been said before too, he was able to give those around him space and encouragement to come forward with their own thoughts and ideas. He was very much inspired confidence in people. And in the book, he was very much the lead author. As has been said before about his abilities as a researcher, I think the same goes as an author. He had the absolute rare gift of being able to construct a book perfectly. And I can imagine, as has been said before about him as an educator, as you said, Adele, that I think that was probably came through in the way he spoke to people when he was teaching them. It was the way he constructed a book with them in mind, the end user in mind, in book form, chapters and sections of equal length, the destination in mind, keeping the reader with him all the way. And I was lucky to have many trips down to Bournemouth after that, and often met up with him whilst he was back in the UK from when he moved to the University of Queensland. We worked on 2 more editions of the book after that, and his daughter Robin joined the author team. And we split the book into 2 volumes, the Destinations textbook and then the case book. Shortly after that, Butterworth Hyman sold the list to Routledge, so it's now published by them, and in its 9th edition, published in 2024. So a true testament to his writing skills and talent. He saw the book as a vehicle to impart knowledge and understood what needed to be done in order to keep the content fresh and up to date. And over those 40 years and all the changes that we've gone through, he could see how to work the issues and the formats and to keep the reader in mind. The reader's needs have obviously changed immensely throughout that time too. In this book and others, Chris provided a basis for the teaching of tourism and the structure of courses, and the foundation of the many great schools of tourism, as his career path is testament to. I also had the privilege to be able to work with him on another of his great textbooks, Contemporary Tourism, which he co-authored with Mike Hall. This was first published in 2007 and now in its 5th edition. Again, he used his skills to craft a unique offering for students and for teachers, keeping the reader in mind every stage. And now, as you know, I work at Goodfellow Publishers. We set up Goodfellow Publishers in 2008, and Chris was one of our greatest supporters. He really believed in the strengths, the benefits, innovation and flexibility of an independent publisher to work with and for authors, as can be seen from his work on the journals and the aspects of tourism series that he created with Channel View Publishers, another independent publisher. He was always a source of sound advice. He constantly updated us of his experiences in the current role of his time to give us an insight into academic politics and the changing needs of academia and the student courses therein. When we established Goodfellow Publishers, he was at the time Pro-Vice Chancellor at Oxford Brookes University, so myself and Tim Goodfellow met with him often, either at the university or near his home in Brackley, where he was living at the time. He was always keen to collaborate on new projects, and we were delighted when he agreed to take on the series editor role for our contemporary tourism review series. At this time, online publishing was quite a new thing. Print was still king, and if a book did have an online presence, it had a larger print presence. So this was somewhat pioneering. The tourism reviews are, as said there, state-of-the-art short reviews written by leading thinkers of their time as a signpost to go on and learn elsewhere. They were the crux of the matter, written by those that had generated that area of research. Chris was able to use his large network to call upon, and it resulted in the reviews written by key thinkers in the field. Without a doubt, this is due to the unfailing respect he held amongst peers and colleagues, all keen to have the opportunity to work with him and to be a part of a project that had his backing. And so we come on to the book that we're launching today. For me, as Dimitrios has said, it started with a phone call one afternoon from himself when him and Carlos had been discussing the book idea. And the idea was, as Dimitrios said, Chris's PhD students would contribute, all to be a tribute to him. And I didn't have to hesitate to say yes. That was back in April 2003, and here we are now with this fantastic volume that's not only a valuable academic contribution to the literature, but also a living testament to Chris. The impact he's had on so many academics and the research, as well as the wider tourism field, is obvious. The book's a who's who of key names in the tourism field, all masters and mistresses of their respective fields. As has been said before, he was never one for the spotlight, and I always felt he was rather taken aback that we felt a volume, a tribute to him, was worthy of publication. And so I was delighted when he was willing to work with us to shape the book and create it into what it is now. And moreover, more delighted when he was willing to write the first chapter, a retrospective of his 40-year career as an academic and his thoughts on the future impacts and issues such as AI, climate change and knowledge management, all things that we've mentioned here today. And you will note I've also drawn out that part that Dimitrios also drew out. That, typical Chris, I was keen that the book should showcase the work of my students, the contributors, and how they have grown since their PhDs. That is clearly the case. He really worked his magic in his suggestions on the book structure, suggesting ways to order and shape the contributions, to really pull them all together. And as you said, Marie, you can see how they all tie together and it creates a much bigger whole. It was a true skill of his as an editor and an author. He always had the reader in mind and what they would want and would achieve from the book. And also I'd like to take the opportunity to thank all of you, all the contributors, and obviously Dimitrios and Carlos for your time and patience during editorial requests, deadlines and proofs, but also a heartfelt thanks to you, Carlos, and you, Dimitrios, for coming up with the idea and for corralling everyone together, and moreover for having faith in myself and us, the Goodfellow Publishers, to publish the book and take it forward to fruition. It's an absolute honour. So to conclude, the book was still incomplete when we received the sad news of Chris's untimely death. It meant that we were all the more keen that we should make this a book that Chris would be proud to have on his bookshelf. I also contacted his family regarding images for the cover, and his daughter Amy was kind enough to give me some of these from his selection of his own snaps from his travels, which were used both on the cover and throughout the book. It's lovely to have their blessing and their involvement, and it's made the book so much more personal, I think. I miss Chris and I miss working with him as an author, but still feel so proud that we have had this book as our tribute to him, and so we say thank you. So whatever our relationship with him was, advisor, author, editor, supervisor or friend, I think we all thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Sally. It's late, you've heard a lot of things. Would like actually to conclude this.
Don't be in front of
That's fine. I think there are 2 or 3 things that you've heard a lot of testimonials, you've heard a lot of people talking about Chris. Chris was one of the very few academics that you never heard bad things about. He also, in the 35 years I knew Chris, he never said anything bad about anybody. It's unbelievable. He led by example. And I think that we've taken his example and actually we're taking his legacy forward. And this is what we are doing in our professional practice and our personal conduct. And I think we'll leave that to here. We say thank you. He's looking at us down from his balcony up there, and we are profoundly thankful for everything he has given us and the community. And thank you, Chris. And thank you.
So thank you very much.
Thank you to you and to Aveiro University
to the
project
team.
and the team and Philippa doing all the technical support and everybody else who has been. You'll do the thing. I'll thank you. You thank the team, and we all.
So thank you very much for coming. Okay, especially our guest. It is a pleasure to see you in Aveiro. I hope he's already a frequent flyer, but I hope you also. This is your 3rd time in Aveiro. Okay, Adele maybe same thing. I don't remember. So come back because you are always welcome. It's a pleasure. And to you all, thank you very much for coming. It has been a very long day and it has been a pleasure. And in particular, we would like to thank our researchers. I mean, this is a very big project with lots of responsibility. And we are just about to, I would say, to stop sometime in June. But it's going to be a quick stop because what we really want is to start implementing this. So networks and all this knowledge cannot stop, I would say, in the theory, in our publications. What we have to do is just to make them alive and put them into practice. This is what we would like to do. So thank you very much again for coming. It has been a pleasure and see you soon. Thank you. And we have a coffee break now. Not coffee break, it's farewell. All right?
Not a coffee break, it's a
Not
coffee
coffee
end.
break. Coffee end. It's a farewell.
That's fine.
All right, thank you. I forgot to say João. João. Come on,
Nice one.
Coffee break.
João também veio para o coffee break. Não coffee break. Well, in Portugal.